Good evening, everyone. I declare the meeting of the Port Phillip City Council open, and I welcome the members of the community that are here tonight. The City of Port Phillip respectfully acknowledges the Yalukit Willam clan of the Boonwurrung. We pay our respects to their elders, both past and present, and we acknowledge and uphold their traditional relationship to this land. Council has a local law that determines how this meeting will be conducted. There's a time allotted in tonight's agenda for public question time. And during public question time, members of the public can ask specific questions on general matters other than those that are relating to a topic that's on the agenda for tonight. Members of the public are only to ask specific questions and shall not provide statements or contextual comments relating to that question. Consequently, the official meeting minutes will record the question asked and any response given. The number of questions that a member of the public may ask shall be at the discretion of the chairperson. There's also an opportunity for members of the public to ask a question and to make a comment on a specific item on tonight's agenda, and this will be done prior to Council considering the item. We encourage questions or comments from the public that are directed through the Mayor, are not defamatory or objectionable or abusive in language or substance, but rather are presented in a spirit of mutual respect of the Council and the community. And we ask all speakers to abide by the direction of the Chair. So if you wish to ask a question or speak to a report, please complete the blue form that's available at the table just outside the chamber and hand it to a staff member. And I encourage you to please limit your questions and comments to around 3 minutes and to avoid repeating any points that have already been made by other speakers. And please note that all council meetings are now being live streamed. Live streaming and recording allows the community to watch and listen to meetings in real time, providing greater access to council decision making and debate and improving the openness and transparency. The live stream on this meeting is available on Council's website, and the recording of this meeting will also be available to view on Council's website after about 48 hours. The cameras will film and record councillors at this meeting. However, care is taken not to film or record images of members of the public. If a member of the public does ask a question or makes a comment about an agenda item, they will not be filmed, but their voice will be heard in the live stream and recorded. And please also note, in accordance with Council's local law, that this meeting cannot be audio or videotaped unless permission is granted by the Mayor. Okay, so now we'll move to the agenda. First up is apologies. Councillors, do we have any apologies? Councillor Crawford?
Councillor Gross is an apology.
Thank you. Any further apologies? Councillor Simic?
Madam Mayor, Councillor Brand is also an apology tonight.
Great. So we have movers. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Bond. I will now put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. So then we'll move to minutes of the previous meeting. Councillors, the minutes of the ordinary meeting held on the 5th of July 2017 have been circulated. Are there any questions relating to these minutes? I note there are none. Then I will now ask, can I have a motion to confirm these minutes? Councillor Bond to move, Councillor Baxter to second. Then I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Great. We'll move to item 3, declarations of conflicts of interest. Does any councillor have a conflict in any matters being discussed at tonight's meeting? There are none. Then we'll move to item 4, which is petitions and joint letters. And councillors, we've got 2 petitions on the agenda tonight. I'll go to the first one first, which is St Kilda Sea Baths Roof Terrace. And councillors, we have no speakers or requests from members of the public to speak on this item. Councillors, do you have any questions of the officers? There are none. So we have an officer's recommendation, councillors. Would someone like to move this or something different? Councillor Copsey to move. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Baxter. Councillor Copsey, would you like to speak?
Just to note that there's significant community interest in the sea baths, and we thank the organisers of the petition for engaging with council on this matter.
Councillor Baxter, would you like to speak? No? Then, would anyone else like to speak to this motion? Then I will now put the motion. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you very much. So the second petition is Carlisle Street. So Carlisle Street Shopping Village, and the petition requests 24-hour ban on the consumption of alcohol in Carlisle Street. And councillors, we've had 2 requests from members of the public to speak. So I'd like to call on Igor Vayner now, please, to come forward. Welcome. Mr Vayner, if you would please sit down, turn the microphone on, state your name and suburb for the record, please.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Igor Vayner. I work in Carlisle Street, 141 Carlisle Street, Balaclava. I'm a trader. I have been in the street for 26 years, from 1991. I've seen the street development in a number of different ways. The most, I guess, the one that stands out the most is what we're here to talk about the alcohol consumption, and we're finding that the overall safety of the whole street has really deteriorated. Every time there is an event of any kind of antisocial event or violent event, police are called. While the police arrive, unfortunately, the right people who have caused the problem tend to disintegrate, and they've gone, so the police are really effortless to do anything about that. But even if they do arrive, they can't do too much because alcohol is being allowed to drink. The overall antisocial violent behaviour does stop a general public coming to our street. We've got always complaints about trying to avoid the area. We have had a petition that we've circulated through our traders, about 20 shops that were in on this, and in 2 weeks and another week to collect that, we had approximately 809 signatures, and they were all about the safety as the main reason why they've agreed to sign it. We did not petition it. People have signed it on their own will, which is very important. So we didn't actually go to anyone and ask for them to sign on what their thoughts are. It was left on the bench and people signed it themselves. It does show that the local community finds Carlisle Street to be not a very safe place. I do believe that the council's motto is to keep the streets safe and keep the local area safe, so hence the reason why we're doing this. We would like this to be a safe area for us to work at and to have more people coming to the area and to thrive as a suburb. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr Vayner.
Thank you.
Now, thank you. We'd ask for Mr David Besser, please. Thank you, Mr Besser. If you would state your name and suburb for the record. Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me? Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is David Besser. I reside at 101 at 36 Dinella Lane in Balaclava. I'm a property owner. Our family have lived and worked here for probably more than 50 years. So I'd say we've got reasonable credentials in the area. We haven't just moved in. My children live in the area. Family live in the area. All pretty much off Carlisle Street, one street back, Dinella and Marlborough Street. Firstly, the changes over time we've all seen. I think you've heard from many, many people. I'm Jewish. Everyone talks about Carlisle Street very fondly, but lately the discussions have changed quite dramatically from that sort of older generation saying we don't want to come down anymore. We want to go to Glenhuntly Road, we want to go to Bentley, and they're too scared to come, their children too scared to come. My kids even coming out of the house during the day are scared. Now, I understand that it's not just alcohol and there are other issues in the street, and I understand that, but to do things about the other issues is probably something that is more of a state issue and a country issue if we talk about drugs. But the thing that we can do is alcohol. You know, that's something that we can control and isn't unreasonable for people not to drink in the street. We walk out during the day. My daughter is 13 years old, and, you know, she'll get spat on or, you know, accosted. Now, I can't tell if it's drugs or not, to be perfectly honest, but it's certainly the groups that accumulate around the chairs, outside the supermarkets, outside the, you know, and others, are certainly alcohol. It would seem alcohol-based. I haven't done a .05 check on them, but I think it would seem that it is alcohol. And the council, many councils have already started these processes and made it difficult for people to drink in the street. To us, it's so obvious. I don't understand. I mean, I can see the benefit of banning it, but I can't see the upside of letting people drink during the day. And it's bewildering to me. I've never really had any profile in the council and come and spoken to them. You know, I develop in the street and I do a lot, but I leave that through third parties. But this is a pretty passionate area for me, considering we live here and we see it every single day. And I don't know how many of the councillors live here personally, you know, but if you walk outside the street, I don't know if you guys are comfortable walking down the street by yourselves during the day. We've heard stories where some of the councillors are not, or some of the people working in the council aren't comfortable to walk down the street by themselves. So it would seem that we can't change the world, we can't fix all the problems, but the ones that we can fix is that 4.2. And, you know, I'm pretty passionate about this one. And, you know, I would hope that the council is as passionate about making this, you know, it's the council's face, Carlisle Street. There's lots of areas where you are, but you're, you know, I see you all walking down the street every day, you know, into all the different shops, and this is your face. So if we're not proud of our face here, what are we proud of? City Port Phillip's an amazing city, amazing area. You can actually do something fairly simple, and I don't think it'll hurt anybody if we take the alcohol off the streets. I don't want to get involved in major campaigns, but personally, if I feel that if we don't get anywhere on this, I'm going to have to, you know, the owners of the area and others are going to have to get a bit more passionate about doing things, because we're concerned over time that it'll have an effect on the values in the street. And we all depend on the values. The council depends on the values, the rates. We all depend on the success of the street. The traders, you know, there's only maybe 10 of them here, but 800 or 900 people signed a petition. So we're all, you know, what can I tell you more? But we really hope the police support it. Everybody supports it, so I can't understand what would stop it. So hopefully you'll vote for yes, and hopefully it'll be the end of at least one problem in the street, and then the others we can all deal with as time goes on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Besser. Now, councillors, happy to open it up for questions, but I will note that this is a response will be provided to this at a future date, and tonight we're just receiving the petition. Councillor Simic, do you have questions for officers?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I do. And noting, as you've set out, that tonight we're just noting the petition and looking for a response from officers at a future council meeting. I have two questions with respect to that. I'll ask them together just in the interest of time. Firstly, in preparation for the advice, what further community consultation might council undertake? And then also looking at this not from a law and order perspective, but a health perspective, what consultation might council undertake with service providers working with people in the area to address some of these issues from a service provider's point of view?
Ms Jeffs, would you be able to provide an answer, please?
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. So any proposed change to a local law which is proposed in the petition would be the subject of broad community engagement. But it is fair to say that in the preparation for the reply to this petition, council officers will provide a broad range of information and advice for the council, including social, economic and environmental, in fact. But it will be the council's decision whether there's specific community consultation on this particular matter. And also, in taking advice from council officers, we've also we'll be engaging the advice of service providers. I think council's aware of the community safety concerns in Carlisle Street, but also has a long and proud history of social justice commitment in the city. And so it is a balance to make, and we'll be taking advice from a range of providers, including those service providers who work with drug and alcohol affected people in our city.
Thank you, Ms Jeffs. Councillor Pearl.
Just a question on the officer's recommendation. Would you be able to provide an indicative timeline about when that response will come to a future council meeting?
Through you, Madam Mayor, we'll be hoping to do that as quickly as possible, but we'll be looking at least August. I would be thinking the second meeting in August that we would be looking at.
Councillor Baxter.
Thank you. With regards to responsible service of alcohol in terms of the packaged liquor proprietors on the street, what responsibilities does council have to monitor and perhaps even report to the police any breaches of a liquor licence by a business that is serving alcohol to an intoxicated person?
Ms James.
In terms of responsibility of council, in terms of liquor licence, Madam Mayor, council has a planning compliance unit and monitors compliance or responds to complaints received from the community in terms of breaches of liquor licence. Usually that's from music venues or taverns. I'll have to take on notice if we've actually responded to any in relation to local businesses that sell alcohol. The police generally get involved in those matters.
Thank you, Ms James. Any further questions, councillors? If not, we have an officer's recommendation. Do I have a mover? Councillor Pearl. Councillor Bond a second. Councillor Pearl, would you like to speak?
I'll speak at the end if that's right.
Councillor Bond, would anyone else like to speak? No? Councillor Pearl?
Firstly, thank you for making the effort to come to council. It's not an easy thing to do, particularly for the first time, we're all the better for you doing it. I had the pleasure, use of a better word, of attending the police forum that was held, and many of you were there, and it's hard not to be touched by the experiences that were expressed at that forum from traders, local people and also service providers. About the difficulties that you're facing on that street. From a retail point of view, retail is hard enough at the moment without having to deal with some of the issues that you're facing. And from a resident's point of view, everyone deserves the right to live in a safe, harmonious community that's working well together. And ultimately, you've demonstrated that there's a small group of traders here tonight. But with 809 signatures to a petition, this is a serious concern that the council has to consider, and that's been heard loud and clear tonight by myself, and I wouldn't dare speak for my fellow councillors, but it will be duly considered, and the response should be adequate to your concerns, I would hope. So thank you for making the effort to come here tonight. We appreciate it, and we hear you loud and clear.
Thank you, Councillor Pearl. I will now put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you very much. Now, councillors, we'll move to sealing schedule. We do not have any documents requiring sealing. And then we'll move to item 6, which is public... councillor... Public question time. Sorry, I got myself lost. Councillors, and we've got 3 people that have requested to speak. I'd like to ask Mr Isaac Herman, please, to come forward. Mr Herman, if you'd state your name and suburb, please, for the record.
Isaac Herman from Elwood. Good evening, Madam Mayor, councillors, CEO, council officers. Good evening. I commend council again on its recent initiatives and endeavours vis-à-vis the Elwood Canal Resource Working Group, the CEO's Forum and the Asset Team's new and revived direction. I'm sure the good people of Elwood look forward to the first of Council's bi-monthly updates as promised. We also look forward with anticipation to the Flood Management Plan review community consultations. Are there any dates as yet for these events? In the interim, I have some concerns. Could council officers update us on the apparent delays concerning the canal's one-way valve installations and what needs to be done in order to expedite this essential measure? Now, with regard to the Municipal Emergency Management Plan, Subplan 1, the Flood Emergency Plan, and Subplan 4, the Emergency Relief Centre Guide, which do not appear to be readily accessible documents, I have some pressing questions. In the event of significant flooding, where should the residents of Elwood seek an emergency shelter, a group shelter, or a relief shelter at the initial emergency relief stage? Where are these shelters that, and I quote, may be a community hall or some such like? Should Elwood residents and others have to cross potentially several torrential currents, contrary to all safety imperatives, in order to reach what will become a virtual island where we are now situated? In 1989, a fire truck and other vehicles simply floated by the St Kilda Town Hall. Why may council officers think that this is a suitable location, while staff here and at the library across the road were marooned for hours? We are sitting on old swampland and in a current floodplain. There are local flood-safe community alternatives in Elwood from church, scout, school and other neighbourhood venues. Has council allocated enough resources and forethought to address what appears to both community and emergency response-related professionals from outside of council as an unmistakable gap in municipal flood emergency planning? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Herman. Now we'll take those questions. Mr Walters, thank you. I wasn't quite sure. So the first one being the meeting dates, the second one being the one-way valves, the third one being the emergency shelter initial stage, and then there was a few others. But Mr Walters.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'll tackle the first one and my colleague will take up the rest. With respect to the bi-monthly community forum that Council requested as a resolution, which was a forum to keep the community informed about flood-related matters in Elwood. We've got a tentative date of the 24th of August for the first one. That's to be confirmed, and we've drafted terms of reference that we've circulated to the Canal Wall councillors for feedback, and they're yet to be finalised, but once they're finalised we will issue invitations to the proposed participants. And there's an update for councillors coming on the 8th of August on Ulster Creek generally.
Through you, Madam Mayor, just to add to that one, the review of the flood management plan, the Melbourne Water Flood Management Plan, which is due, is the plan for that is under development at the moment with Melbourne Water. So there's engagement underway to work out a timeline and the way that we will engage and they will engage the community on that. In relation to the that's the timeline for engagement, the emergency relief centres. So the emergency flood plan and the emergency relief centres sub-plan both sit under the municipal emergency management plan, and there are 8 sub-plans in total. The 2 sub-plans that were inquired about tonight are under review at the moment, and as part of that review we will look at how we make that information public. And
the timeline for that?
I will have to take the timeline on notice.
Okay.
Yep.
The one-way valves.
The one-way valves I will need to take on notice as well. I'm not sure of the timeline or what the hold-up is there.
Thank you very much, Ms McNeil. Thank you very much, Mr Herman. The rest are taken on notice. Ms Rhonda Small, please. Good evening, Ms Small. If you could just state your name and suburb, please.
Rhonda Small, St Kilda. I was very pleased to see that the council is embarking on its review of the outdoor events and festivals policy, and to see that there's a survey up on Have Your Say for residents, traders and others to complete, which I duly did. My question relates to the fact that the survey contains not one question about the St Kilda Festival, which is the largest and most expensive festival that the council supports. I was a little bit surprised to see that there was no such question. So I'm just wanting to know why there isn't a question about the St Kilda Festival in the survey.
Thank you very much. I'll ask Ms Blair or Ms Jeffs, please.
Through you, Madam Mayor, though there isn't a specific question on St Kilda Festival, the event strategy covers council-run events, which include St Kilda Festival and St Kilda Film Festival and some other smaller things. So I'd be very happy to have feedback on St Kilda Festival as part of this engagement process.
Thank you, Ms Small. And our third member of the public, Mr Paul Hickey, please. Welcome, Mr Hickey. If you could please state your name and suburb for the record.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Councillors. Paul Hickey, resident of Middle Park. I'm here to complain and follow it up with that complaint with a question to Council with regards to Council process covering building, planning and heritage. We started a process 17 months ago to replace a damaged piece of fence in front of our house on Canterbury Road. That process is only just finished, and the main culprit for the delay is Port Phillip Council. I had the confused and frustrating experience of dealing with heritage, dealing with building, dealing with planning, dealing with the arborists, dealing with roads, dealing with footpaths, all to replace an 8-metre section of our front fence. No one was competent, no one gave us the correct information, and if I can indulge in you, I'd like to walk you briefly through the timeline of the experiences we had. I approached Council in March, informing them that we had a damaged fence and could we please obtain their assistance with regards to what I have to do to satisfy your processes and your permits. I initially was put onto Heritage because our house has a heritage overlay. Heritage could not give me a clear indication of what I had to do to comply with your processes. That took 2 months to find out we had to do nothing because we were replacing like for like. Then I was put on to building. I was then informed because we were having an external builder giving us the building surveyor giving us the building permit. We didn't have to be involved with Council. That was one blessing. But then I was then informed by Mr Borg that he would help me by providing me with an order to restore, order to build, that he said would extricate our application through Council. It did nothing of the sort. All it did was to provide an opportunity for a Council member to ring me up every 6 weeks to ask me what was happening. And for me to continually reply, nothing's happening because we can't get Port Phillip Council to provide us with the permits, approvals and paperwork that we need to begin construction. We began construction in March of this year. It finally took 3 weeks to put the fence up. During that period, prior to the construction occurring, I was eventually told by Council that despite the fact that the fence had been damaged for the best part of 25 years, that all of a sudden there was a risk of it falling down in December. So I had to rip the fence down at a great cost to myself, put up temporary fencing, $1,000 worth, to then make our site secure between December and the construction commencing in March. As I said, this fence had been damaged for the best part of 25 years. And why Council may not have been aware that this fence was damaged was that it was covered by ivy. The fence had been damaged by a significant tree growing inside the fence, and the extent of the damage was only made evident once I pulled all the ivy off it. That was in February of 2016. So between February 2016 and April, when I contacted Council asking for their assistance, the fence wasn't a problem. It wasn't until I was given this order to restore that Council now decided that the fence was a problem and it had to be ripped down in December. Temporary fencing had to be put up at my expense prior to construction occurring. But I'm just going to backtrack before we get to the got to that point in December. We had the order to build issued against us, supposedly to help us, which provided us with no assistance whatsoever, only just more headache and bureaucratic process. We were then told we had to do a report and consent, which we didn't have to do a report and consent. The fence was more than 9 metres away from the intersection, therefore it did not fall within the new guidelines issued by the state government following that fence collapse in Carlton. I tried to point this out to council. They weren't terribly interested in hearing about it. So when I eventually got on to the builder why we hadn't had our building permit issued, he said, because you need a report and consent. I said, why? Oh, because council have said we had to have it. So that held up the report and consent. That held the building permit up for another 3 months. I eventually extricated the building permit out of my building surveyor in December, having gone back to planning, saying, why are you preventing a planning permit being issued when we do not need a report and consent? Then to be told, sorry, we've lost your paperwork. We've lost the building permit, the building design and plans that we had submitted in August. And this was now November. And I said, well, where are they? Oh, sorry, we don't know. So I just asked the person in building, Miss Pridmore, could she provide a letter stating that we did not need a report and consent to at least get the building permit issued? No letter was ever given to me. I contacted Miss Pridmore on 4 separate occasions. I only was able to get the building permit issued when I eventually convinced the private contractor that no building permit was required and what the information he was given by council was incorrect. So there was building, there was heritage, and there was planning. But the best one of the whole experience was the arborists. I submitted the significant tree application on Anzac Day of 2016, paying the fees. I think the fees I paid council for this entire experience came to over $1,000. I had to pay the fees for the arborist to inspect the tree, and then pay another fee for the arborist to issue the permit to allow me to chop down the tree that had damaged this fence in the first place. I don't have a problem with that. My problem is this. No one bothered telling us that the permit had been issued. 3 months I waited. No permit, no communication, no nothing. I eventually got on to Mary in council, in the, I think she's in the arborist section, and I said, look, can you tell me what's going on? I'd rung arborists 4 times. Not one of them had returned my calls. Not one of them had informed me what was going on. None of them had even bothered to come and say we had inspected the tree, which they were meant to do. But before we finish, Madam Mayor, I'm nearly finished. The permit was sent to an incorrect email address. If this wasn't so serious, it would be a comical dissertation on the processes of the staff of the council which you sit with regards to governance and administration. So eventually we got the permit. The tree was ripped out. We eventually had to pay a public asset bond to use the footpath. We had to pay another bond to protect the footpath. I got that bond back 2 weeks ago. It took me 4 months to get that bond back from council, with council staff coming out and claiming we had damaged the footpath, yet the footpath is in the same condition it was when we started the build. Again, no communication. The money has been refunded with no explanation as to why suddenly the footpath is in a satisfactory and state relative to what it was when we started the build. So having given you that amazing description of our experience, my question is, how can this be tolerated? What's going to be done so other people don't go through this disgraceful experience? And the cost, our out-of-pocket cost from council is over $2,500. Temporary fencing we never needed. Delays in building, delays in permits, delays in construction. What are we going to get refunded for that? And what are you people going to do to actually improve, ensure that the council processes are A, explained, B, followed through, and B, C, ratepayers are treated with an efficient, timely, respectful manner when they're coming to you asking for your help?
Thank you very much, Mr. Hickey. Before I hand over to our CEO to address your questions, I just wanted to say thank you for raising that and sharing your experience with us. I'm incredibly, and I know that our councillors would be the same, disappointed and appalled by your experience. And I can assure you that our councillor team has instructed the organisation to review all of our processes around our customers' experience, or our residents' experiences with dealing with our council on all things, including planning. So essentially, we've asked for our customers, our community, our residents to have a positive experience in dealing with council. So we're in a process of doing that. I would like to hear from our CEO, around the answers to those questions.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor. Mr Hickey, I apologise for the experience that you've had on behalf of the organisation. I'm ultimately, as the CEO, responsible for customer service. I regard myself as the Chief Customer Officer in the place, as well as the Chief Executive Officer. If you could spare some more time, I'd like to meet with you to learn in more detail your experience so that we can get it right for the next person.
And with regards to our out-of-pocket costs, any thoughts?
I would like to meet with you and understand your experience, and we can certainly discuss that, Mr Hickey.
I appreciate that, but often I've found when these issues go outside a public forum, the answer, of course, then is no. And when I've got a public forum here for other ratepayers to experience and hear what is occurring to us.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'm happy to consider those in discussion with you, Mr Hickey.
I appreciate the acknowledgement.
Again, I apologise for the experience that you've had.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr Hickey. Councillors, that's the last of our members of the public that's requested to speak to this item. We'll move now to councillor question time. Councillors, do you have any questions? Councillor Pearl?
Two quick ones tonight, Madam Mayor. Can officers please provide council with an update on the request from the local clubs at JW Murphy's Reserve for them to install video surveillance equipment on a council building in a bid to prevent the large-scale problem currently being faced by vandals that are targeting facilities in the area? The offer from the club to meet the cost of this equipment via a member donation was made at a council meeting on the 7th of June.
Thank you, Councillor Pearl. Ask Mr Trail. Thank you, Mr Trail.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I've been in contact with the club since that offer has been made regularly, and most recently last Friday, the 14th of July. In that conversation, I have kept informing them that we're looking to take up that offer. With surveillance cameras, we need to ensure that we've got the right legislation and policy working behind us. Failure to have that could expose us to fines of up to $1 million. So the club are working with us, and we're working around how we might be able to progress that offer with them in collaboration with the club and that offer.
Thank you, Mr Trail. Councillor Pearl, you had a second
Just
question?
quickly, any update in timeline, indicative? Won't hold you to it, promise? No, don't promise, actually.
Through you, Madam Mayor, we're expecting an update on some of the legislative requirements in the next 2 to 3 weeks. From that, our next steps will be clearer on how much we need to do or how much the club may need to do.
Thank you. Councillors, any further questions? Councillor Pearl?
My question relates to the St Kilda Road North Precinct and developer contribution plans for the area. Given the unprecedented amount of developments in the St Kilda Road North Precinct, both planned and currently underway, could officers please detail what developer contribution plans, DCPs, exist in the precinct to foster services and community growth?
Thank you, Ms Turgeon.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I can advise councillors that there is no current DCP operating in the St Kilda Road North Precinct. When the St Kilda Road North Precinct plan was undertaken, there was a comprehensive assessment of the infrastructure needs that would be generated by new development in that precinct. And at that time, we did commission some work to provide advice as to whether a DCP would be of merit in that area. The advice back to council was that the level of funds generated by a DCP would be low, in the order of about 20% for any of the project costs, as a consequence of the principle that is applied to DCPs, which is apportionment, which means that the beneficiaries of any piece of infrastructure, the costs need to be borne across those. And because of the level of substantial development already in this precinct, about 80% would be beneficiaries of existing developments and residents, workers and office staff, and council would then be required to meet the costs of that 80%. So the advice really back was that there is a low benefit of of the funds that would be generated to deliver that infrastructure. And with infrastructure development contributions plans in those established areas, they've proven quite problematic in terms of being able to predict the level of development that would actually occur, predict the rate of development, the costs of infrastructure over a 20-year period, and quite the experience of the very few councils in established areas that have done them is that there's often a further shortfall in the funds generated. So it was determined that putting a DCP in place, which is also a very strong administrative requirement, was not of merit. Perhaps I can just add to that that the Department of Planning is looking at a more simplified version of DCPs, recognising that this issue of development contributions in established areas has been problematic for a long time. So we're hoping that there will be a simplified system put forward which puts less risk on council in terms of entering into a DCP, and we've certainly got a watching brief on that. I'd also highlight that developments in this area are required to contribute a 5% open space contribution at subdivision stage.
Thank you, Ms Turgeon. Councillor Purley.
So given the rate of development since that was put in place, or the position of council taken to the C107 amendment, given the rate of development, i.e. we've got a situation now where it's almost turbocharged in that area with the rate of development, which I would assume, I'm putting words in your mouth, but I would think that rate of development's been vastly faster than what was planned, given the amount of officer focus we have in that precinct, etc. Has there been enough change to reconsider potentially a DCP for that area, given the fact that we're now having to, the rate of damage that's been done to the laneways along St Kilda Road, the lack of green amenity in the area, the lack of basic amenity in the area, let alone community services, isn't at a rate which is meeting the demands of the community that's now moving into that area? Has it changed sufficiently enough where we consider a DCP for that area, or advocating for a DCP for that area?
Through you, Madam Mayor, certainly it's been a high rate of development, which is largely due to the fact that the planning controls were uncertain for a period of time, and now those planning controls have been bedded down. Developments which were effectively waiting in the wings have all come forward at a particular point in time. The analysis that was undertaken in the DCP, though, did actually look at the total quantum of development that would be achieved over a 20-year period. So whilst the rate has certainly been elevated recently, that really doesn't change the fact that the quantum of development, of new development versus existing development, would be that same breakdown between approximately 20 and 80%. So the cost that could come back to council would be in the order of 20%, which is still potentially worth doing if council was absolutely committed to doing a piece of infrastructure. One of the challenges of a DCP is once you enter into that, council is committed to delivering that infrastructure over 20 years, regardless of the level of development that actually occurs. So there can be a further funding shortfall.
Thank you, Ms Turgeon. Councillors, any further questions of the officers? Councillor, question time? There are none. Okay, so now we will move through to presentation of reports. So firstly, I would like to go to report number 8.1, which is the Older Persons Consultative Committee Annual Report. I'd like to call on Ms Coralie Ling, please, the Chair, to come forward. Welcome, Ms Ling. If you could please state your name and suburb and turn the microphone on, that'd be terrific.
My name is Coralie Ling and I live in St Kilda. Madam Mayor and councillors, I know you have received the report and I'd just like to highlight one or two things. First of all, the Older Persons Consultative Committee is an advisory and advocacy committee, and we believe, and I hope all of you believe too, that what is good for older people is good for the whole community. We especially appreciate the work of the councillors who've worked with our committee. Last year was Councillor Horvath, and this year it is Councillor Groth, who's not here today, but he feels he's eminently suited to our committee because he's the most senior of the councillors. And he has been doing a good job, we think, so far. We appreciate it. The membership of our committee is quite diverse, We represent the whole area of the City of Port Phillip, from Elwood right through to Port Melbourne. And the members of the committee, we have a wide background of diversity. Part of our objectives is to work with the council objectives and plan, and we have been doing that with the previous council plan, and we are working on doing it with the new council plan, but this is our continuing work in the future. Over the last year, we held a forum on living alone, which is very important in the City of Port Phillip. A large number of people living alone, especially elderly people. And just recently, last month, we held a forum on elder abuse, again, which is a very important issue, and was highlighted for us by people from Senior Rights. And we did it we held two in English, and we also held two forums, one in Greek and one in Russian. We're especially interested in the built environment and how that affects elderly people. And of course, that's, as I've already said, it's important for everybody, but we've been monitoring footpaths and toilets, and we're pleased that these are on the agenda of the council. We're especially interested in Fisherman's Bend and what is happening there, and we've been able to hear reports and to make a contribution to the Community Council. And we're especially interested in sustainability, and we've been making comments for that committee as well. Our current particular concern is the introduction of the My Aged Care program from the federal government, and we don't think at this moment that it's understood very well, and we're trying to work out ways that our committee can help the people of the City of Port Phillip to understand the My Aged Care program, and we have had help, of course, from staff here at the council. Coming up is the Seniors Festival, and we thank the council for sponsoring this festival. This year will range from drama, film, writing to exercise, dancing and shredding. And the whole idea of the Seniors Festival is to make the city more welcoming and accessible for older people. And it's done that in the past, and we're looking forward to planning that for next October. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Ling. Councillors, do you have any questions of the officers on this report? Oh, you can. Maybe it's a question for Ms Ling. Councillor Crawford.
Ms Ling, what's shredding? What was that last thing that you said, the part of the festival? Did I mishear it? You said there's dancing and there's drama, and what was the last thing you mentioned? Was it shredding?
I mentioned shredding, yes.
What is shredding?
Shredding of documents that we've been keeping that would be good to
get rid of.
Privately got rid of.
Oh, awesome. Okay, I thought it was some kind of new kind of dance thing that I was completely missing. Thank you.
The Rotary Club is, doing this for us. Yes. Yes, very cathartic. Yes.
Thank you, Ms Ling. Councillors, any questions of the officers? Councillor Sim. I have one question. My question is, what process is going to be undertaken to develop a new plan for the OPC?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the OPCC have met just recently to review the council plan, and we have a working group made up of the chairperson and the vice chairperson and nominated members on that working group, and we will be looking at finalising the plan in the next 4 weeks. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions, councillors? Then we have an officer's recommendation. Councillor Simic would like to move. Do I have a second? Councillor Pearl to second. Councillor Simic, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Ms Lynn, for attending and providing a broader overview, addressing some of the things in the report and also providing more information. The recommendation asks us to endorse the terms of reference and also provides us with the annual report. I know that Councillor Gross isn't here today. He speaks very fondly of his work with the Alderpersons Consultative Committee, and I'm sure that he would have much preferred to be here today to hear and participate in the report. So I'd like to acknowledge Councillor Gross's work in the committee, and also his commitment to making sure that the rest of the councillors are engaged and aware of what the committee is working on and how we can participate. I'd like to thank all of the members involved, and I note particularly in the annual report that there's an acknowledgement that Maureen Smith, who has a long-standing involvement with the committee, sadly passed away. So I'd like to pass on my condolences there as well. Very interested, and thank you for sharing with us some of the forums that you're running at the moment. And particularly from my perspective, I think it's fantastic that you're translating forums into different languages as well, making sure that they're accessible to different communities, noting very clearly that ageing happens differently for people of different communities, and I think that's very important. So, in short, I'd like to thank you for your advice and advocacy, and say that we look forward to the Seniors Festival, and I'd like to endorse the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Simic. Councillor Pearl.
Miss Ling, your energy, enthusiasm and intelligence is a wonderful example for us to follow. So thank you for leading your group, and thank you for delivering the great outcomes. Thank you also for the good little performance review on Councillor Gross. So we won't tell him that. Thank you very much.
Councillors, anyone else? Councillor Copsey.
I just wanted to say thank you very much, Coralie. I think you're absolutely correct that the issues that matter to older people are the issues that matter to our community broadly. I can see in some of the issues that have already been discussed tonight that we've got issues like accessibility of our public realm and social isolation, which is feeding into so many of the issues that face not just older persons in our community, but those who are vulnerable and people who have drug and alcohol dependency. These are often factors as well. So thank you for your continued focus on those issues. There's certainly things that have come out from this group of councillors in our council plan, and we look forward to continuing to work with the OPCC.
Thank you, Councillor Copsey. Anybody else? I'll also just quickly endorse what the councillors have said here tonight. I also welcome the annual report. I would like to thank you as the chair and also the committee members for all your work and dedication to volunteering for this group and our community. I endorse the changes to the terms of reference, and also congratulate you on your achievements. And I know there's going to be another busy and active year coming up. So well done. Councillor Simic, would you like to close?
Just to make one very brief comment, I did forget to mention, you talked about the changes happening at a federal level. I indeed agree that they're very complicated, and thank you for providing the advice. We need your advice and look forward to keeping in tune with that conversation as well. So in closing, thank you for coming today, and look forward to continued working relationship.
I'll now put that motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Now, councillors, we'll go to a presentation of the report for Local Law Number 1. And we have no members of the public that have requested to speak to this item. So, councillors, do you have any questions? Councillor Pearl.
Would officers please give an explanation about how Section 60 of this amended document will operate, the section in relation to shopping trolleys? As you may know, I've been waging war on trolley wallies in our municipality, and hopefully this will help us achieve that, win that war.
Ms James.
Through you, Madam Mayor, the clause on shopping trolleys in the amended local law has been strengthened to require the proprietors to install either coin-operated mechanisms or wheel locking mechanisms by the 1st of July 2018. And also they will continue to be required to remove the trolleys that have been abandoned by shoppers on council streets.
Any further questions, councillors? I have one. Ms James, can you please outline what the members of the public can do if they want to make a comment or object or something to these propositions?
Through you, Madam Mayor, we're proposing a Section 223 process as in accordance with the Local Government Act, which would include advertising the amended local law in the Government Gazette, the Age, the leader newspaper on our website, and providing copies at our corporate centre to invite submissions into the in regards to the amended local laws. The consultation process we're proposing is from the 20th of July to the 30th of August. In addition to that, we'll be providing copies of the amendments to relevant people like the police and any other traders groups, especially in consideration of the shopping trolley amendments, and any other interested stakeholders. So there'll be an extensive consultation process undertaken and submissions will be invited as required under the Section 223 process.
Thank you, Ms James. Councillor Pearl.
In preparation for the report, given the petition that was presented tonight, did Council consider any changes to the liquor, well, the substance of the liquor sections? I think it's off the top of my head, Section 54, around the issues that were presented tonight in the petition around Carlisle Street.
Not directly. The alcohol clause in the local law has been reviewed and the word alcohol was replaced with the word liquor. However, there are provisions in the current local law for council to designate areas as alcohol-free zones. So there were no changes that were identified that were required to be made to that particular clause, apart from the change of the word, like I said, alcohol to liquor. And there's already restrictions in terms of alcohol consumption on at various times.
Councillor Baxter.
Thank you. It's actually relevant to clause 54. I was actually curious as to why the definition, why the term alcohol is substituted with liquor, and what the definition of the two terms are, and why that's important.
That's a very good question. Through you, Madam Mayor. The alcohol is in a number of substances, so I can surmise that liquor is more specific a term and is used in a number of local laws.
Thank you. Any further questions, councillors? Then we have an officer's recommendation. Do I have a mover for that? Or something different? Councillor Pearl to move, Councillor Bond to second. Councillor Pearl, would you like to speak to that?
There's some good changes in here, but obviously we'll see what the community's feedback is, but particularly enhancements to Section 25 around clothing bins. I'm looking at Teresa, but she's not looking at me. Also clarification around parking fines. Section 42, for example, is obviously come back from community feedback and Section 60. So we'll obviously see what we get in terms of community feedback, and also looking forward to seeing the end results in terms of potentially some community consultation and feedback based on what we've heard tonight in Carlisle Street. Thanks for your great work, Mr Wright and Ms James. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Pearl. Councillor Bond. Would any other councillor like to speak to this? I also will thank the officers for their great work and a thorough review of our local laws, number one. I guess it's a really important way of making sure that we keep pace with, what our community expectation is and the changing issues and public expectations. I'm looking forward to, hearing from the community on what they think of our proposed updates. And I just have to note that our community have a right to feel safe and enjoy our public places, and I think these laws are these proposed changes are a way to help us achieve that. I am particularly keen on the abandoned trolleys ones as well. The noise from backpackers potentially, and also the clothing bins. The derelict building one is a step in the right direction, although I'm quite keen to see us as a council do something more in that area, but I know it's outside the local laws area. So thank you very much for your hard work. Councillor Pearl, would you like to close?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Then I'll put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. We'll move to item 8.3, which is the Victorian Pride Centre. The review of submissions in response to the public notice as required by Section 189 and 223 of the Local Government Act 1989 for the intention to transfer property at 3/77 Fitzroy Street, St Kilda, to the Victorian Pride Centre. Councillors, we don't have any members of the public that have requested to speak. Do you have any questions? Councillor Simic.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I note that no public submissions were received as a result of this process. I'm wondering if officers can elaborate on where we advertised and where we sought submissions from, what some of the learnings from the process might be, if officers can also surmise why it might be the case that we didn't receive any submissions.
Thank you, Councillor Simic. Ms McNeil.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I will hand over to my colleague to answer the specific question about where we advertised, but in relation to why we didn't receive submissions, often it's an indication of that nobody is particularly concerned with what we're advertising.
Through you, Madam Mayor, we advertised through the Age, we advertised through the local Leader newspaper, and we also advertised on our website.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from councillors? There are none. So we have an officer's recommendation. Do I have a mover? Councillor Copsey to move. Councillor Crawford, my apologies, to second. Councillor Copsey, would you like to speak?
This is an important step to provide the opportunity for the public to comment on the disposal of the land, but it's also a really important step forward on the road to the establishment of Victoria's first Pride Centre right here in Port Phillip. We're very, very proud to be hosting the Pride Centre, and it's always great to take another step forward on this road. So,
thank you, Councillor Copsey. Councillor Crawford.
I just would quickly note that I am heartened that there were no negative submissions around us, the step forward that Councillor Copsey has mentioned, because it is, as you also mentioned, a source of pride to have the Pride Centre here, and we look forward to it being here sooner rather than later.
Councillor Baxter.
I'd certainly echo what my fellow councillors have said. The word pride and proud, probably said about 20 times so far, which is great. And in fact, Pride Round is coming up in the AFL as well, so everybody tune in for that. But I do have to just voice a little bit of concern that that we received no submissions whatsoever for a disposal of an asset worth several $1 million. So that does worry me a little bit. I'm not sure. I'm not saying in any way that it was a failure on our part in terms of consultation, but I'm happy to take it as no news is good news, as meaning that everybody's fine with it. But I would have thought that at least a submission in favour of it might have come in from somebody. But anyway, it's just is a little bit strange.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. Any other councillors wishing to speak? Councillor Copsey, would you like to close? No? Then I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Again, carried unanimously. Thank you. Now we'll move to item 8.4, which is the proposed lease for the Royal Melbourne Yacht Squadron. Councillors, we have one person that's requested to speak. Miss Rhonda Small, please.
Thanks very much, Rhonda Small from St Kilda. I just have a very simple question. It relates to the fact that the proposed rent for the Yacht Squadron is going to be $40,000, and there's a comment made in the report that while the desirable option is that it's desirable that there be a market rental for such rental, that this is reduced in some areas because there's community benefit offered by the proposed community organisation or others who are using the building. What I wanted to ask, though, was given that the market valuation for the ground rental has actually been done and that the current proposed rental is on the basis of that market valuation, is it possible to be told what the market valuation is so that we understand what the reduction that Council is offering? Thanks.
Thank you, Ms Small. Councillor may take that question up on your behalf. Councillors, there are no further members of the public. Do you have any questions of the officers? Councillor Simic.
Well, just think we're going for the same thing in the interest of openness. I'd like to take on the question that was just put.
Thank you, Councillor. Ms McNeil.
Through you, Madam Mayor. It is a full market rent that is being proposed. It is a ground rental as opposed to including the building, and that is because the building was constructed by the Royal Melbourne Yacht Squadron, and so we're only charging them for the rental of the land, and that is the amount that is being proposed. So it is a full commercial rental of $40,000, which is the market rental for a ground lease.
Thank you, Ms McNeil. Councillors, are there any questions? There seem to be. Councillor Pearl.
The school that's being built, is there? There's obviously some improvements that are committed to under this. How do we ensure that those commitments are delivered, and what happens if they're not delivered? Is the first question. The second question, which I'll just combine together, if that's okay, is how do we ensure that the community is actually getting decent value for money and community benefit out of this facility? Because well, it's not a facility we own, obviously, but we're a bit locked in terms of we own the dirt but not the building. So how can we put our hand on the heart to ensure that we're getting value for money here?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Just to clarify, the state does own the building, so all of the land and the assets within that. The Royal Melbourne Yacht Squadron has the lease of those assets. It's just that it's considered fair to not charge them a lease, the rent for buildings that they have constructed. In regards to the construction, so the lease states that a certain amount must be constructed within 5 years, which was agreed with Royal Melbourne Yacht Squadron. There is an asset management plan in place, and there is reporting requirements each year on works undertaken, as well as community benefits and a number of other things. So each year there'll be an annual report on all of those items, which will ensure that construction is occurring as agreed, and also that the community benefits are being realised.
Councillor Crawford.
I think you may have half answered my question. I guess I know that the sort of standard term of rental for council is 15 years, and yet this one has been extended to 21 years. Is that due to the fact that they have built the building on which they, that they use?
Through you, Madam Mayor, it is more in relation to the amount of investment that they are making in the assets. So they are putting a significant contribution towards renewing and upgrading the assets, and it's to the extended lease period is to reflect that level of investment to enable them to secure the funding and also realise the benefits for their membership that is contributing to the costs of those.
I have a question, Ms McNeil. Our practice has been over the last sort of couple of years is in the key terms of the lease agreement is to detail any discount that may be offered to the leasee. Are we saying here that there is no discount at all given to the Royal Melbourne Yacht Squadron?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That's correct. There is no discounted rent, as it is a full market rent for the ground rental.
Councillor Crawford, you have a question?
I understand it is full market rent. It just seems like an extraordinarily small amount for that particular, a foreshore piece of land. Am I naive in it is?
Do you have it? Your
question there's not a question. I guess I'm just clarifying. It just does seem like a I'm making the comment. It seems like a very small
So
amount.
maybe the question is, when was it last valued?
Through you, Madam Mayor. The valuation was done during negotiations, which was about 18 months ago. The valuation was carried out by Doug Lane from Charterkett Cromer. The valuation was provided in two parts. One is for ground rental and one is for land and improvements. Land and improvements, the valuation was around 100k per annum. In the negotiations, we've agreed that from a fairness and equity point of view, that the ground rental is appropriate to Royal Melbourne Yacht Squadron.
So a further question, if I may, just on that. Since the building is owned by the state, do they pay the state rent for the building?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We're the Committee of Management for that property, and so the rental is paid to us on behalf of the state, and we then take responsibility for the site.
Did I see your hand up over there, Councillor Pearl?
I just don't fully understand the valuation, right? Like, as in, I'm supportive of the motion this evening, but just for future reference, you've got a shipyard in the front, so it's over a 2,000 square metre block. So if we split it into two titles and had the building on one, not two titles, but effectively two areas, if we had the building on one and a shipyard at the front, which is on Pier Road, beachfront property, assume it's 1,500 square metres. I'm finding it a bit hard to believe that the market rent for that is 30,000 a year. Are we sure on our numbers?
Through you, Madam Mayor. We're sure on the numbers. We've paid $3,000 for that valuation. It's provided by someone who provides valuations for the council along the foreshore, for Stokehouse, Donovan's and other properties.
Thank you. Councillors, are there any further questions? If not, we have an officer's recommendation. Do I have a mover for that or something different? Councillor Pearl to move. Councillor Bond to second. Councillor Pearl, would you like to
No,
say?
happy to move, and you can see that the concerns of the councillors have been taken into consideration, albeit going forward, as there's a lot of large leases coming up, the scrutiny you would expect to increase. So happy to support it. It's a beautiful building on the foreshore, and the club, from what the small amount I've had to do with them, seems very committed to integrating themselves with the community through sailing activities and also use of the building, which is fairly heartening. And I think they're a good custodian for the building itself, albeit we're not talking about that this evening, we're talking about the ground. I would hope future councils would consider potentially opening up the front. It will take a long-term plan in association with the club, but potentially opening up the front of that building to more public access and potentially better use than the current yacht yard that's there at the moment. That will be a decision that will be taken probably long after my time. So happy to move this motion and strongly encourage the club to work with council to ensure that the assets are used for broader community benefit, not only the club.
Thank you, Councillor Pearl. Councillor Bond, would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Copsey.
Thank you. I'll be supporting this tonight. I think it's fair to say that the questions being asked at the meeting this evening are reflective of this council's strong interest in realising community benefit under our leasing arrangements, and I think that there's good structures in this lease in place. What's important is that throughout the term we make sure that those are enforced and that we keep an eye on realising those benefits. So these arrangements offer us a way to work in partnership with organisations who, as in this case, have made large asset contributions, and we will be keeping a vigilant eye on the community benefits and look forward to realising those in partnership.
Thank you, Councillor Copsey. Anybody else like to speak? I'll also endorse what my fellow councillors have said. We have received no submissions on this as well, so our community seems to be quite comfortable with the process. It is, however, a significant building. And it's located on public land in a very, very credible place. So we do need to ensure that it's seen as open to the public and not locked up for exclusive use. So the community benefit requirements are important to be enforced. So thank you. Councillor Pearl, would you like to close? Then I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Now we'll go to item 8.5, the proposed discontinuance and the sale of road between 17 Coventry Place and 378 Coventry Place. We have two members of the public that have requested to speak. I'd like to call Mr. Richard Cherry, please. Hello, Mr. Cherry.
Thank
you.
You
State your name and address for suburb
Cherry
for the record.
From SJB Planning in Southbank. I'm here on behalf of the owners of 376 Coventry Street in South Melbourne. So thank you for allowing me to make a couple of brief comments on this item. I've read the Council's responses to the 3 points of objections made by the owners of 376 Coventry Street, and I'm here to respond to these comments prior to Council making its final decision, to which I understand will take place at the 16 August Council meeting. Council has stated that the site images show a blank wall at the end of the subject laneway. It is the boundary wall of the dwelling at 376 Coventry Street, South Melbourne. The property owners of 376 Coventry Street have never used the laneway for pedestrian or vehicular access. It is correct in that the current blank wall does not allow direct access to residents of this property. However, these comments are referring to existing site conditions only. The comments do not deny that 376 Coventry Street has rights over this laneway and potential future pedestrian and or vehicular access. Council has stated that 376 Coventry Street, South Melbourne has access to a different laneway at the rear of that property. So the laneway referred to then is Peel Place, which does not provide direct access to 376 Coventry Street. It kinks around in an L shape before reaching the property to the immediate east of 376. From there, a narrow walkway connects with 376 Coventry Street. Both this walkway and an easement that runs along the eastern boundary of 376 Coventry are narrow and cannot provide vehicular access to the property. One of the reasons the owners purchased the house was for the access available via the wider laneway in question for future renovations. With regards to the two narrower easements, it's not possible to get a small or medium excavator or bobcat down them, perhaps a wheelbarrow at best. The laneway in question will be able to get a 3.5 tonne excavator and standard size bobcat down it, which will help with demolition and excavation. Council has stated that the advertised planning application plans do not show any requirement for rights to light, air and ventilation, as there are no doors or windows to be located near the subject laneway. So these plans have not been approved and there's no guarantee that they will by the planning officer. An objector to the planning application has the right to appeal a council decision to VCAT, further clouding timeframes and an ultimate outcome or decision. As such, there's still a real chance that the plans will require further significant changes, to which we cannot speculate as to how a different design would look. To that end, it would be prudent for the owners of 376 Coventry Street to request the purchase of 1/3 of the laneway to maintain their access to light, air and ventilation if necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cherry. Now we also have Mr. Andrew Moses. Mr. Moses, please come forward. If you could state your name and suburb, please.
Andrew Moses, South Melbourne. So, Madam Mayor, Lady Councillors, got that in the wrong way, don't I? Madam Mayor and Councillors. So, thank you for the opportunity to present to you tonight. My name's Andrew Moses and I appear here as one of the co-applicants to acquire the laneway between 378 Coventry Street and 17 Coventry Place. From my mind, the background and the issues have been sufficiently covered off in the agenda, so therefore I don't think it's anyone's benefit and interest of time to actually regurgitate what's in there. What I would like to do is draw your attention to the presence of an independent report addressed to the Council, prepared by Traffics Group, which is one of Melbourne's leading specialist traffic engineering and transport planning consultancy firms, who provide a full range of traffic engineering services to the private sector and local government. As the report was submitted as part of the documentation suite, I'll take it as read, however just draw the Council's attention to the following conclusions. Firstly, and I quote, "The laneway is insufficient to allow the design passenger car as defined by the Australian standards and small rigid vehicle as defined by the Australian standards to be driven into the laneway." Secondly, ease from 17 Coventry Place overhang the laneway, placing a restriction on the height of any vehicle or load that wishes to use the laneway. This is lower than the height clearance required by a small rigid vehicle. Thirdly, any renovation work to 376 Coventry Street has a range of alternatives by which materials can be moved to and from the site, in addition to the existing access available. These include the laneway off Coventry Street between numbers 376 and 374, the laneway off Peel Place through 376 and over the top of 376. I quote, "The discontinuance of the laneway off Coventry Place will therefore not result in 376 being unable to undertake any future renovation work." And finally, 376 does not have any windows in the wall that abuts the laneway off Coventry Place, and none are proposed as part of the planned renovations submitted to Council. So in summary, I request that the Council approves the request as submitted, as you've followed due statutory process in getting to this point, with one objection tabled, the basis of which has been mitigated by the presence of an independent report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Moses. Councillors, that's the end of our public questions on this item. Do you have any questions of the officers? There are none. Just to note that we are considering and hearing the submissions tonight and not making any decisions on the actual item. Councillors, we have an officer's recommendation. Do I have a mover? Councillor Bond and Councillor Copsey to second. Councillor Bond, would you like to speak? Councillor Copsey, would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Then I will put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you very much. We'll move now to 8.6, which is 245 to 251 Normanby Road, South Melbourne. We had a forum earlier today, which we heard from any members of the public that wish to speak at this particular item. So we don't have any further requests from members of the public to speak to this item. Councillors, do you have any questions from members for the officers? Councillor Crawford.
I just wanted to ask some of the concerns about the development, the further concerns. I know that some have been changed and improved. Are those things that can be adjusted by conditions, or are they, or would they require a reapplication, please?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the requirements that we have put down really shouldn't be required just by conditions. We should be able to see them. One of the dangers of not being able to see them is that we could, in effect, create a Frankenstein monster in terms of what the conditions would be and what our expectations would be as compared to what the overall development would be. So there are a number of concerns still with the building. They've certainly moved a long way from the previous application, but we are of the view that we should be able to see them before they can be conditioned. But if the Minister is of a mind not to support the officer recommendation, and if Council support that recommendation, and the Minister chooses a different path, we have also provided draft conditions which may help to overcome some of those concerns.
Thank you, Mr Borg. Any further questions, councillors? Then I note we have an officer's recommendation. Do I have a mover for that or another? Councillor Bond to move. Councillor Baxter to second. Councillor Bond wish to speak. Councillor Baxter wish to speak. Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Copsey.
Yes, just to say that the matters that the officers are recommending refusal on, based on in this report, are matters that Council takes very seriously. And we intend to make sure that our planning scheme works for the benefit of our community, and I'm looking forward to seeing the result of this ultimately.
Thank you, Councillor Copsey. Anybody else wishing to speak? And I'll also speak. I I note that this application has been previously rejected by Council. It has come back substantially improved, but still there are too many issues unresolved, and I certainly am urging my fellow councillors to support the officer's recommendation for a refusal. We need to refuse it. We've got high standards, and we'll not compromise those for Fisherman's Bend. I do note that I'm a little confused about the description of the building being an aeroplane turbine design. I personally can't see that myself, but maybe somebody else can. So, Councillor Bond, would you like to close? Then I'll now put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Next we'll go to item 8.7, which is 127 Ruskin Street, Elwood. This is another item today that was during our planning forum and that we heard from several members of the public on. So there are no members of the public that have requested to speak tonight. Councillors, do you have any questions of the officers with this item? There are none. So, councillors, we have a officer's recommendation. Would you like to move that or something different? Councillor Crawford?
I would like to move something slightly different, please, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Crawford, are you able to read the changes?
The changes? So there's just two small changes at 14.3 as we go over. So there's one, there's A and B remain the same, but when we move over to C, the new motion would read the carport wall along the southern side boundary reduced to a maximum length of 6.12 metres. And D, the overall height of the first floor addition reduced by a minimum of 150 millimetres.
Terrific. Thank you, Councillor Crawford. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Baxter. Councillor Crawford, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, we heard from the various parties today, and I know that as the city densifies, there are a lot of growing pains and there's a lot of difficulty maintaining amenity for everyone involved, both in the ones growing their house but also the ones that are currently existing. And I did take into note that it is a solar passive house, and in the interests of perhaps allowing a little bit more sunlight to reach that house in the midst of, in the depths of winter, I commend this motion in order to lower this first addition height because it has gone up with the Melbourne water requirements for flooding in this area, and also to allow the carport to be of a slightly, to be the standard length to allow a little bit more sunlight into the back garden. So hopefully finding that middle ground between both the needs of the applicant and the person opposing.
Thank you, Councillor Crawford. Councillor Baxter, would you like to speak?
Just to agree with Councillor Crawford that yes, I see this as a compromise position. I do understand that that the objectors have that sunlight is particularly important in the construction of their dwelling, and that while making sure that we're performing our duties according to the planning scheme and making sure that we're following these very important rules, we may be able to do something here to make everybody somewhat happy.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. Anybody else wishing to speak to this item? Councillor Copsey.
I'd just like to thank those who came and participated in the forum today. We heard people speak with passion and professionalism today, and councillors are certainly sympathetic to the situation that residents find themselves in. I think that solar gain and solar access are issues that are starting to really come to the fore as we start to realise the benefits of renewable energy in our community and of passive heating and cooling designs. It's, like many areas of the planning scheme, something that I think state planning needs to evolve within. What we are doing on this side is hopefully finding the little bit of wiggle room that we have as a local government to hopefully propose, put in place some changes that might be beneficial to the objectors and not cause too many amenity impacts, or I believe no amenity impacts on the applicants. And I'd just like to close by saying that it was a very respectful discussion at the forum today, and thank all of those involved for speaking so directly, frankly, but also respectfully.
Thank you, Councillor Copsey. Anybody else wanting to speak? Then Councillor Crawford, would you like to close? No? Then I'll put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Terrific. Now we'll move to item 8.8, which is Assembly of Councillors. Councillors, there's no one that's requested to speak. Do you have any questions of the officers? If not, we have an officer's recommendation. Do I have a mover for that or something different? Councillor Baxter to move. Councillor Pearl to second. Councillor Baxter, would you like to speak? Councillor Pearl? Would anyone else like to speak? Then I'll put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Now we'll move to 8.9, which is Westgate Tunnel Environmental Effects Statement, a late submission to our agenda, but nonetheless important. There are no members of the public that have requested to speak. Councillors, any questions of the officers? Then we have an officer's recommendation. Do I have a mover? Councillor Simic to move. Councillor Bond to second. Councillor Simic, would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Firstly, I'd like to thank the officers for writing a submission and providing the submission in a timely manner. In the inquiry which took place has concluded and is going into a review process of submissions received. I think that the City of Port Phillip submission is really well written and very timely put to the inquiry. I think that the main bit which the submission highlights is that there is really a lack of justification or rationale for implementing the project. While there are some, and as the submission sets out, very small benefits that can be identified in the 10,000 or so pages which we were asked to review, there is, as a whole, a lack of rationale for the project, as the City of Port Phillip understand. In addition to the officers' comments, I have a number of personal concerns as well. One of the things that this highlights is that we're faced with a decade of unfair tolls. Transurban, who's a private entity and the major beneficiary of this project, has the right to charge tolls on CityLink until 2035, but to fund the Westgate Tunnel, CityLink tolls would be extended for 10 to 12 years, meaning that people who never use it will be funding the road, and I don't think that that's a very good approach from the state government. We also know and note in our report that more roads lead to more traffic. When operational, the project will provide a short-term decrease in the number of vehicles using the Westgate Freeway Bridge, but will ultimately be encouraging driving and providing little long-term benefit to commuters. That's a major concern. We also know that building a road to solve traffic is like buying bigger pants to solve obesity. By the time the Westgate Tunnel road is built, there would actually be more cars on the Westgate Bridge than there is now, because the new toll road won't be able to accommodate the increase in traffic in our growing city. It's not value for money. $5.5 billion is a huge amount of money for a toll road, which does nothing to solve, in my opinion, the traffic problems in the long term. We need to be looking at alternatives and urging the state government to look at alternatives, not more tollways. One of the options which councillors have discussed with officers and that I endorse is looking at how we move for more freight on rail. It's unacceptable that we are putting so many trucks and moving freight by road when we know through other modelling and also examples internationally that freight on rail is a long-term solution which needs to be looked at in order to address congestion problems that a city like Melbourne, a place like Victoria, faces. This is an important topic. Once again, I thank the officers for the submission that they've put. I hope that the state government pays very careful consideration to the City of Port Phillip's submission. We are a city that would be affected by this project, and as a result, our opinion and our contribution should be valued by the state government, and I hope that it will. Thank you, and I hope that other councillors also endorse the recommendations from the officers in the submission that's been presented.
Thank you, Councillor Simic. Councillor Bond, would you like to speak? Would any other councillor like to speak to this motion? Councillor Copsey.
Thank you. Yes, to echo Councillor Simic's thanks to the officers for the gargantuan task of digesting the EES and providing a submission in a timely fashion. I, along with Councillor Brand, am one of the Port Phillip representatives to the Metropolitan Transport Forum. So I think it's timely to just note that the City of Port Phillip's submission is one of a number of submissions that are being made by local governments on the EES for the Westgate Tunnel. We are not alone in our concerns. There's been a number of concerns raised regarding the benefits and the impacts of the project, which will be fleshed out, no doubt, in the EES process. But I will also note that the Metropolitan Transport Forum was particularly concerned about the time frame for making submissions. We are not alone as a council in finding that the 30-day time frame for submissions was almost unfeasible for councils to have a chance to consider the documentation. The Metropolitan Transport Forum actually made a request for the time period to be extended to 60 days, which evidently was not approved by the state government. And so we find ourselves in a position where our officers have had to work really, really hard, and I want to acknowledge the effort that has gone into digesting that huge document and coming up with such a succinct and compelling expression of our position in Port Phillip.
Thank you, Councillor Copsey. Anybody else like to speak? Councillor Baxter.
I'll just keep it short and just thank the staff for all the work that they've done. It seems like a really big job.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. Councillor Simic, would you like to close? No? Then I'll put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Now, item 10, 8.10, consideration of a late submission, which is for Amendment C143 for 19 Salmon Street and for 299 Williamstown Road, Port Melbourne. There are no members of the public that's requested to speak to this item. Councillors, do you have any questions of the officers? No. Then we have an officer's recommendation. Do I have a mover or on that? Councillor Bond? Councillor Crawford? Councillor Bond, would you like to speak? Councillor Crawford, would you like to speak? Would anybody else like to speak to this item? No? I will quickly speak. Just to note that we had one submission objecting and it was received during the exhibition period. So further heritage studies have not supported the inclusion of 229 Williamstown Road into the scheme. And I think it's really critical that we don't compromise the inclusion of 19 Salmon Street, which is a key property of heritage value to our community, Port Melbourne, as this is the root site and it was a major piece of heritage that we really need to keep. So I certainly endorse the motion I'll now put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. So we'll move to the last item on the presentation of reports, which is 8.11, footpath trading for the Prince of Wales. Councillors, we have one member of the public that's requested to speak. I'd like to ask Mr Tom Walker to come forward, please. Sorry to keep you late, Mr Walker, but thank you.
It's early for me.
Oh, okay. Mr Walker, if you would turn on your microphone, please, and state your name and suburb.
Okay, good evening, Mayor and councillors. Look, I'll keep it short. We've been dealing on this submission for now a couple of years and there...
Mr Walker, if you would state your address?
Tom Walker, St Kilda.
Thank you.
We've been dealing on this submission for some time, and I realise that it's been a complicated issue because it's non-conforming in terms of acts like the DDA Act and those types of things, but I would urge the Council to accept the report that's been tabled before you. We would like to get an approval and some surety on the footpath trading area, so we're seeking an approval for the submission tonight.
Thank you, Mr Walker. Can you tell me how you're connected with this property? What is your role?
I until recently was the operational manager of the hotel. I have resigned my directorship of the Melbourne Pub Group very recently, just in the last couple of months, but still retain an interest in the operation and position in terms of the management of the premises.
And if I may ask one more further question, Mr Walker, do your fellow directors support your submission tonight?
Yes, they certainly do.
Councillor Bond, you may ask a question. Are you asking it of the...
Yeah, just of Mr Walker. When we met with you a couple of weeks back in the room outside, you indicated that your preferred option was to have no change at all to the beer garden out the front if you could keep your entire beer garden and arrangements could be made for the queuing to be around that. That was your preferred option. Have you changed your mind, or is that still your preferred option?
Well, I think what we discussed on that day at short notice was that if that arrangement could remain unchanged, would that be the best result for us? Well, yes, I did say at that meeting that would be the best result for us, but my understanding is previous to that meeting that wasn't an option, and I'm not too sure. I wasn't at that meeting where there were some measurements taken on the footpath, but my understanding from that subsequent meeting was that there were problems with the clearances and measurements from that meeting as well.
So if that was an option, would you want us to go down that path?
Well, yes, look, clearly if we were able to retain an arrangement on the existing clearances for the footpath trading area, that of course would allow us the existing room, which of course is increased rather than the revisionary scheme, that would be a result for us, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Copsey, you have a question for Mr Walker as well?
Yes, and thank you very much for staying. I know it's an early for you, but you have sat through this evening. I was also at the meeting with Councillor Bond that he's referring to, and I just wanted to understand, to clarify, it's my understanding that the recommendation that officers have put has been being trialled at the pub for approximately the last 18 months. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
And have you found it to be a satisfactory arrangement during that time?
Look, either of the old arrangements or new arrangement don't really pose too many operational problems. So whilst it's, I would say to you that it's certainly easy, the revision or the submitted arrangement that we have been using for the 18 months is no problems and operationally feasible and easy to roll out. The old scheme was just as satisfactory.
And just one more. So you mentioned DDA compliance. And so as a local business owner, is it important to you that the business is accessible and the area around it is accessible?
Well, of course, accessibility is everything about business. If there's difficulties in terms of getting in, there's certainly an impact, yes.
Thank you very much, Mr Walker. Please take a seat.
Okay.
Councillors, are there any questions for the officers? Councillor Copsey, yes.
Thank you. So Mr Walker has alluded to that there has been quite a lengthy engagement process in relation to the development of the recommendation that's before us tonight. I was just wondering if officers could give a brief outline of what that engagement has entailed.
Mr Jay?
Through you, Madam Mayor. So the footpath trading guidelines were adopted by Council in 2010. In 2011 we started the process of reassessment with the operator at that time. We went through a number of schemes and options which were tabled by the operator at that time. We were at the point of reassessing and issuing a revised permit when ownership of the venue changed. So we started the process all over again with the new owners. So we've had regular contact with the permit holder and director, Mr Walker, through this reassessment process.
Thank you, Mr Jay. Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Crawford.
May I ask just a few short questions in a row, if that's okay? So I understand that we are looking to review the footpath trading again soon. Is that and I guess my question is: is it a state legislation that we set the distances for footpaths, or is that something that is discretionary and decided by council? And those are, I guess, the two. Oh no, and what is the minimum distance for DDA compliance in terms of any footpath? Like, there is a minimum distance to allow for that compliance. If you could just remind me of what that is, please.
Thank you.
Through you, Madam Mayor. In relation to the determined pedestrian widths under the footpath trading guidelines, I suppose when the guidelines were set, it was done in consultation. Obviously, we had to do it in order to comply with the DDA. So under the DDA, it does state that the minimum pedestrian zone width is 1.8 metres. However, that can be so it should suit most situations, except in commercial and shopping environments where the pedestrian demands and increased accident risks may require wider paths. So that, based on our advice from our solicitors at the time, establishing the footpath trading guidelines, it was determined that the pedestrian zone widths that were set under the footpath trading guidelines as per the table in attachment 1. So where it sets that the minimum pedestrian zone width for a footpath where the width from the building line to the edge of the curb is more than 5.1 metres to 6.9 metres, that we allow a 2.5 metre minimum pedestrian zone width. Sorry, what was the other question? So the footpath trading panel does have the powers to vary the pedestrian zone widths but obviously we would have to do necessary referrals for that, and that hasn't been done at this particular time.
So, Councillor Councillor Crawford, would you turn on your microphone to us?
But we are seeking to do a review, is my understanding, of the footpath trading guidelines.
Can I add to that? Through you, Madam Mayor, at the moment we are not seeking to do a review of the guidelines. We are seeking to review the fees that are charged for the guidelines. So that's one aspect of the project. But can I also recap on some of the questions and some of the responses from Mr Keane? Is that Council does have discretion, yes, to reduce some of the distances and some of the setbacks. In Fitzroy Street in particular, and in particular in this location, we look at a pedestrian zone of about 2.5 metres, and that is because it's a very highly trafficked area. Certainly one of the areas through Fitzroy Street and some of the wider footpaths that we asked for that, and also that there's been certainly some advice given to us by the police that you should always try to have, particularly around licensed venues, as wide a footpath as possible. So there's no issues of brushing or bumping, etc. So that's one of the purposes. But I would like to also explain the purpose why this report is here and not with being dealt with under delegation, is that under the guidelines, any variation to the DDA requirements, and the DDA requirements encourage us to move any footpath trading venues off the building line. That is a requirement under the DDA, unless you can provide a shoreline, and that shoreline helps people with visual impairment to use a cane to orientate themselves and assist their navigation of the footpath against a hard wall line. And that's the purpose here. So we think we've tried to balance all the options and opportunities that are available under the guidelines with supporting local business and also at the same time satisfying the priorities of the footpath trading guidelines.
Thank you, Mr Borg. Councillor Bond.
The distance between the fence of the Prince of Wales and the base of the trees being the only non-movable items on the footpath in front of the Prince of Wales, what is that distance? Not to the hard stand at the base of the trees, but to the trunk of the tree.
Mr J, or... Mr J, if you would mind popping on the microphone. There's all those hundreds of people out there listening to us.
Indeed. Indeed. So with the bike hoops remaining up to that point, there's the potential to maintain a pedestrian zone of 2.6. With the bike hoops and other infrastructure relocated, there would be we could encroach onto the tree pits, potentially by about an extra 20 centimetres there. So with some resurfacing and removal of other infrastructure, there's opportunity to widen and move the pedestrian zone further over, allowing for the tree to grow, so only occupying potentially up to half of the tree pit. So that's 2.1.
Sorry, through you, Madam Chair. So when we did the latest round of measurements where we're trying to determine whether we could encroach a bit more towards the tree pit and incorporate some of that to provide a 2.5 metre pedestrian zone width, with the removal of all the other infrastructure, it was determined that the pedestrian zone would be 2.1 metres. So in order to achieve a 2.5, it would still require a reduction of 40 to 50 centimetres for the trader to rein in their trading. So it would mean that they wouldn't have to reduce their outdoor seating by a whole metre. Instead, there was the potential there that they could just reduce it by half a metre.
Thank you, Mr Keane. Councillor Bond?
And the consultant, the disability expert, the report they produced didn't explore this option. Is there any reason this option wasn't given to them to explore, given they were asked to pursue 5 other or analyse 5 other options? This is the obvious solution to me, yet the expert wasn't asked to investigate it and come back on that. Is there any reason it was left off?
Through you, Madam Chair. So when we engaged the DDA consultant, we didn't go to the DDA consultant with a preferred option at all. We went to her with the for her advice as to how we could balance the need for queuing as well as the footpath trading area and how we could meet our obligations under the DDA.
So just to clarify, Ms Keane, you didn't give them any options. She came up with the options, or the consultant came up with the options.
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, that's correct.
I have a question as well. One of the issues from the consultant's report notes that a white cane, for example, could get stuck in the mesh as there was no covering on it, or even in the metal bars. I wanted to understand what the footpath trading rules are around that and what's being done to ameliorate that issue.
Through you, Madam Mayor. So under the footpath trading guidelines, within the municipality we only have 2 other venues that actually trade against the building line. They have been formalised previously through motions of council to be retained against the building line with the incorporation of screens. So obviously the design of the screens can be resolved with the applicant, but traditionally it's your normal cafe barriers that you see out on the street. The screens that were previously approved at the SB were more of a picket fence type screen, but they are secured within in-ground sockets so that they're not easily removable. And then obviously there's not many gaps, or it's of a surface that's appropriate for a walking stick, so something that's solid for it to tap along. Sorry, so what does...
Can I clarify? So is something being done so that a white stick is not going to be stuck in there?
Sorry. So with the current Prince of Wales, as yet nothing has been done until in conjunction with the operators. There was obviously it's going to be a significant cost to the permit holder, and prior to that investment, we wanted to formalise whether the council's position will be to retain trading against the building line.
Councillor Bond.
There used to be panels on those mesh fences that were removed, I believe, in about 2012, mid-2012. They all contained Fred Negro artwork, all those panels. Can you tell us why they were removed?
Thank you, Mr. Jay.
Through you, Madam Mayor. I'm aware of the panels that were attached to the exterior and to the mesh of the screens. They included some cartoon imagery, and a complaint was received that there was racist, sexist and homophobic cartoons on there. They hadn't actually had approval to install those screens, so when that was raised with the permit holder, they were then removed and they didn't pursue a permit for the screens.
Thank you, Mr. Jay. Councillors, any further questions? Councillor Bond?
I'd like to move an alternate recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. Would you like to read your alternate?
The alternate motion as follows: that Council 1.1 varies the footpath trading guidelines at the Prince of Wales Hotel, 29 Fitzroy Street, St Kilda, to allow the retention of the existing 2.0 metre wide footpath trading area against the building. Provide for queuing arrangements for the band room adjacent to the footpath trading area. 1.2 resolves that the footpath trading permit issued under 1.1 must include the following conditions: install solid barriers with in-ground sockets prior to a queue forming to separate the band room patrons from pedestrians, and B, operate in accordance with the approved night management plan.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Pearl to second. Councillor Bond, can you speak to your motion?
I did a little Facebook survey over the weekend, and it was 38-0 in favour of no change to the current arrangements. So I think our community has spoken pretty loudly if we are interested in listening to the feedback from our community. There's been no complaints about the queuing arrangements here. There is no problem. I probably should declare a conflict in that I do drink at the Prince of Wales from time to time. I've observed the queue on many occasions and I've never seen an issue with it. I've never spoken to anyone that's seen an issue with it. All it is a result of an audit done by officers of this organisation have found a problem down there. It's a very wide section of footpath, but I understand that officers wish to formalise the queuing arrangements. So I believe there's ample room down there to do so without there being a reduction to the beer garden. Reducing the beer garden from 69 to 32 patrons whenever there is a show on at the band room will force the management to choose between a vibrant beer garden or live music. So this is the last remaining live music venue on Fitzroy Street. Our community never stop hearing from them about how much they value their live music, about how live music is declining in St Kilda, and this proposal, I believe, will force the Prince of Wales to choose between the beer garden or live music. So anything that hinders live music, I think we need to do whatever we can to preserve it. We've got the example across the road of the Greyhound, which was approved for apartments tonight. That's what happens when we don't value these venues as a council. I've spoken to the owners a couple of times, and we heard again tonight, they clearly stated their preferred option is to have no change. They're okay with an adjusted system, but their preferred option is clearly no change. We heard that again tonight. I don't see any difficulty in accommodating both the beer garden and the queue. There is ample room down there. I've been down there with a tape measure myself. The only bits that can't be moved is the base of the tree, and there's 2.5 metres between any queuing metre and the base of the tree. Everything else down there can be moved and relocated. I deliberately didn't include any instructions in here about relocating that equipment because that's a decision for the officers. If they believe there's a problem down there, I want to retain the beer garden. If they think there's an issue with the width between the bike hoops and a wayfinding sign, I'm sure they'll find a way to relocate them should they believe there's an issue. I don't share that belief, but if they are of that opinion, then by all means go ahead and remove or relocate those items you believe are impinging on the pedestrian width there. I've had a look, there's plenty of alternate locations. If it was my job to relocate bike hoops and wayfinding signs, I don't think I'd have too much trouble finding alternate locations for them down there. So I'm not going to tell the officers how to do their jobs. So therefore I urge my fellow councillors to support this alternate recommendation. One, because the Prince of Wales Beer Garden is such a special place, especially in summer. There's no way we should be imposing any conditions on this venue to close it. And two, we're going to force them to choose between the beer garden and live music. I think any proposal that reduces the amount of live music in St Kilda is just not on, in my opinion.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. Councillor Pearl.
Happy to support the motion based on the feedback that's been received from community. I was swayed by what you were saying before in terms of your preparedness to go ahead with the officer's recommendation, etc. But having read some of the community feedback, etc., I think the alternate recommendation by Councillor Bond manages this balance nicely between the DDA compliance and the community benefit. We've seen how small changes in environments can have very large effects in terms of live music and entertainment venues. Fitzroy Street has enough problems at the moment without causing more problems to compound to make live music venues, if we get this wrong in 2 or 3 years' time, that venue could be extinct, which would be a tragedy for the broader community benefit. So very happy to support the alternative recommendation, and St Kilda has no bigger supporter or advocate than Councillor Bond. Well done.
Thank you, Councillor Pearl. Councillor Copsey.
So I won't be supporting my colleague's motion this evening, and I'd like to flag to my council colleagues that should this motion fail, I'll be moving the officer's recommendation. I find it quite odd to hear this being championed when we're hearing from someone who's personally very interested in the venue this evening that the recommended way forward that the officers have proposed has been functioning at the venue for 18 months. I'm very conscious that it was developed in consultation with the venue. In fact, the officer's recommendation achieves compliance despite the fact that we're starting from a position where trading against the business is an issue that we need to overcome. It's a historical factor, and we've done well, I believe, to develop a solution that allows the trading against the business line to continue with minimal disruption, but also achieves accessibility. A lot changes in 20 years. And I've no doubt that my colleague has great love for this venue, and that we all on council have great love for this venue. But the Prince of Wales is moving with the times, and I applaud them for the effort that they've put into the consultation process and for being flexible and recognising the importance of spaces that we can all access. The footpath is for everyone. It's a shared space. And live music venues are a hugely valued part of our community, and I love that the Prince of Wales has recognised the fact that they are part of a community and come tonight to support the officer's recommendation, recognising that they are part of ensuring that our public realm is accessible for all. I've got to take issue with the presentation of this survey that Councillor Bond has done. We put a lot of effort into community engagement in Port Phillip and into listening to the voice of our community on these issues. And I must say that a leading question on to Councillor Bond's 175 Facebook friends, I don't think... Oh, I just checked it. You might have lost a few. It's not an appropriate way to gauge community sentiment, and I do believe that Councillor Bond speaks from the heart here. I know that he likes to have a beer at the Prince of Wales, but we've seen that this solution doesn't impact significantly on the business, but does provide us with a good level of public amenity, accessibility. It doesn't mean we have to rip out council infrastructure at great cost and lose the sustainable transport infrastructure that's there, the wayfinding signs that help to support the tourism aspects that we have in St Kilda. So I think that I understand where my colleague's coming from, but I think that the balance has been far better achieved by the officer's recommendation. And I won't be supporting the alternate rec, and I'd like to move the original recommendation should this fail. And I'm looking forward to some all-you-can-eat dumplings during July.
Thank you very much, Councillor Copsey. Councillor Baxter.
Yes, thank you. I'd also like to oppose this this alternative motion. There are a couple amazing things in Councillor Bond's speech there. I would love to see Councillor Bond's reaction if I polled my Facebook following and got an answer and then went to him and said, look, the community has spoken, because I think he would tell me they haven't. What we're talking about here is months of negotiations thrown out on a whim. We've got hardworking officers here who've spent months talking to the business, talking to highly experienced DDA consultants, talking to all sorts of experts in the field, come up to a solution that everybody's actually happy with, and except Councillor Bond, who has decided that he thinks it's terrible. He's decided that he thinks this is going to kill live music in St Kilda, despite the fact that we've got a former director here who hasn't even mentioned the idea that he thinks the live music is in any way threatened by this at all. So I think that sort of hyperbolic stuff, we do need to support live music, but if we say that any change that we don't like is going to kill live music, it's just a cover for it's not real, right? The former director has come here, spoken on behalf of his former colleagues on the board that have basically said we are happy with this. With the proposed officer recommendation, not an issue, spent months coming up with it, let's go ahead and do it. What we want is a resolution. And I take issue with Councillor Bond deciding to throw a spanner in the works and sort of take us back to the drawing board, because that sort of instability is actually not what businesses want. So I will definitely be opposing this this alternative recommendation, and I'll be supporting the original recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. Councillor Crawford.
I will be supporting this motion. Having worked on Fitzroy Street for 13 years, I do worry, coming from a hospitality background, that the balance between council having guidelines for safety and DDA compliance and all of those things, there is a balance. And I feel like in this situation that the balance is out of whack. We have an area that is DDA compliant in distance. We installed bike racks and a wayfinder during the period. That was after the trading had always been happening and the queuing at the Prince of Wales had been going on for a long time. So we have impeded at certain points by our infrastructure the distance, and we still are within the DDA compliance. It is part of that reputation, that balance of, when we seem to be nitpicking on certain things here and then we miss other big things over here, I just think in this particular instance, the balance is incorrect. Again, it was not based on any complaints or incidents. I worked across the road for 13 years and have witnessed it working for 13 years. And again, I know that's not data, but there are many, many, many more sidewalks that we have in this municipality where it is just DDA compliant, and I think there is plenty of space for both things to occur, and I think the simplest and the most straightforward option is to keep it as it currently is. So I will be supporting this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Crawford. Councillor Simic.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, officers, for the original recommendation that was put forward. Thank you to the former director who came and spoke to us today. I'm swayed by arguments not to support this recommendation, to support the officer's original recommendation. I've enjoyed the discussion tonight. I'm keeping a score sheet currently of all of the reasons that Fitzroy Street's in trouble. Each meeting, Councillor Bond comes up with a new reason. First it was the Gatwick Hotel, the homeless and vulnerable people on Fitzroy Street, and then it was parking, and this week it's DDA compliance and bike racks. So for me, I think we've reached a compromise solution. I think that the importance of making sure that our venue is accessible remains, and something that as councillors we should be championing. Looking after our community in the broader sense, making sure that not just Councillor Bond but others can also, people who might have disability can also access the venue and drink at the Prince of Wales. So I won't be supporting this. I look forward to the next meeting to hear what else is on Councillor Bond's list in regards to Fitzroy Street, and commend the officers for their work.
Thank you. So, Councillor Bond, would you like to close?
Only to say that whilst a lot has changed in 20 years, anyone who goes to the Prince of Wales outside of Pride Day, but on a weekly basis, would know that the beer garden out the front hasn't changed much in 20 years, and the people that go there have changed even less. And so these agree with Councillor Crawford. There isn't a problem here. These things we need to preserve, not force these businesses to close or shut down or restrict their trading. It's the last thing we should be doing to anyone on Fitzroy Street at the moment.
Thank you. Well,
Madam Mayor, if I could, on a point of order, request that the vote be done in accordance with the local law meeting procedures by division. You're allowed to do that before the vote's put, so request the vote be done under division.
You may, but you can also do it after as well, so that's fine. We'll do that up front. So Councillor Pearl has requested a division, so this means that the votes will be recorded in the minutes and how you voted. So I'll now put that vote. All those in favour? That is Councillor Bond, Councillor Voss, Councillor Pearl and Councillor Crawford. All those against? Councillor Copsey, Councillor Simic and Councillor Baxter. That motion is carried. Thank you. We'll move to item 9, which is notices of motion. There are none. Move to item 10, which is reports by councillor delegates. Councillors, do you have any reports to make? Yes, Councillor Copsey.
I will take this opportunity, it's probably the last time for this year, to just report that the Cultural Development Fund awards of grant monies was made last night, and it was a fantastic event. Councillor Mayor Voss and Councillors Pearl and Simic were there as well. We had a great attendance by the 16 individuals and organisations who have received around $136,000 in funding to support arts and creativity in the city of Port Phillip. We also had some fantastic performances from former recipients of the Cultural Development Funds, including one song that was performed which it came out of a community workshop that in 2 hours, around 20 members of the community developed this song, and it had the members of the audience in tears. It was just so beautiful and so moving. So a great example of the work that this has done in the past, the Cultural Development Fund. There is an exhibition, you'll be glad to know, Councillor Bond, of Fred Negro memorabilia and works that's funded as part of the Cultural Development Fund. And you know what it's called? It's called St Kilda's All Right. And I believe that that is true. So is Port Phillip. We're a richer community because of the contribution of our arts and creative community, and it's been a real thrill to be part of the Cultural Development Fund Committee as the council representative this year. I urge everybody to get along to the exhibitions, events and performances that come out of this great program when they are up.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Councillor Copsey. Any other councillor reports? No. Then we'll move on to urgent business. There are no items of urgent business. And lastly, we'll move into confidential. So, councillors, we've got one item which is confidential regarding contractual matter between council and the Melbourne Metropolitan Rail Authority in relation to the proposed main station. So, council's been requested to keep this matter confidential. So, I'll now call on a councillor to move that the meeting be closed to members of the public to consider a confidential item. Councillor Pearl to move, Councillor Bond to second. I will put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you very much.